Whenever people list off some of the greatest horror films ever made, chances are you've heard John Carpenter's original Halloween mentioned a number of times. Since its first release in 1978, the movie continues to be a major influence on both low-budget filmmaking and the horror genre as a whole. It also introduced audiences to a fresh new talent in Jamie Lee Curtis, as well as one of the most iconic figures in the slasher genre, Michael Myers, aka The Shape, aka The Boogeyman, aka the crazy guy with the William Shatner mask that looks kinda like Mariah Carey the more I think about it, with a taste of killing horny teenagers on Halloween night. While it does feature a ton of recognizable tropes that many horror films practically cannibalized to death in the years that followed, the movie still manages to supply a great deal of thrills and atmosphere that still hold up even after 4 decades. The franchise it spawned, on the other hand, is a completely different story. By the way, I'm doing this whole review completely in character, and if you're asking why, don't think about it. Ugh. Anyway, where was I? Alright, if you thought the X-Men timeline was jacked, wait until you get a load of the Halloween franchise, which featured more retconned ideas and shark-jumping moments than any other franchise that I could think of from the top of my head. Hell, they even did one that had absolutely nothing to do with Michael Myers, and I actually find that to be very underrated. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it yet. By the time we reached the point where Michael went up against a kung fu fighting Busta Rhymes and started hallucinating dead Sherry Moon zombies and white horses, it was time for the series to get the clean slate yet again. And that brings us to 2018's Halloween, which excludes everything in the franchise except the original that started it all. It's 40 years later, and we find out that Michael is still serving time in the same mental institute that he broke out of years prior, and the trauma he inflicted upon Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode never fully healed as she diligently prepares, Sarah Connor style, for their next eventful meeting. But despite everyone telling her that she's f***ing crazy and there's nothing to worry about, Michael escapes yet again to kill even more people on his favorite holiday. John Carpenter returns to produce with a story co-written by Danny McBride and director David Gordon Green, the same people responsible for such comic hits as Pineapple Express and Eastbound and Down. And as movies like Get Out and A Quiet Place showed us, people that are largely associated with comic material seem to have a knack for telling some really great horror stories lately, which is certainly the case with this new Halloween follow-up. One of the biggest reasons why I dug this movie so much is their portrayal of post-traumatic distress. What Laurie went through in her teenage years affected her so bad that it turned her into a gun-toting Kevin McAllister-like grandmother, and Jamie Lee Curtis's performance makes you believe every moment that this is the person that Laurie would turn out to be after surviving such a horrible event. I like that it pulled no punches in showcasing the repercussions of PTSD and how it affects both the victim and the rest of their family. Pretty much the last thing you'd expect in a franchise that features somebody getting stabbed to death with a fucking shotgun. Of course, I can't talk about a Halloween movie without talking about the boogeyman himself, Michael Myers. By eliminating the other films in the series, as well as the idea that Laurie and Michael are siblings, a notion that most fans thought was bullshit for years, the filmmakers brought the character back to a primal level that made him scary to begin with. He is a complete mystery and a force of pure evil that wants nothing more than to fucking kill you. That idea alone is scary enough and shouldn't require any further explanation, so don't think about it. The death scenes featured in this are definitely more brutal and gruesome than what we've seen prior, which should let you know right away that Michael's not here to f*** around. Most of the time, you don't even see him killing, leaving you with just the aftermath, and even the sight of that makes your blood run cold. The rest of the supporting players do a fine job. The look and style feels just as authentic and faithful to the original film, and the movie managed to sneak in a few humorous moments that neither feel disruptive or out of place in this new narrative. The only things that kept it down a few notches for me was the strange subplot revolving around Michael's new psychiatrist that kind of disrupts the flow of the movie, as well as the many callbacks to the original film that made it a little too fanservice-y for me, the few times where seemingly smart characters make clearly dumb decisions, and the lack of a real definitive ending. Like, I know you guys want to do another sequel and all, but come on. I think you could have done something that didn't leave the audience with a bad case of blue balls. I'm just saying. Other than that, this was a great continuation of the 1978 original that I still can't believe took 40 years to finally accomplish. It's funny, frightening, and bloody as hell in a lot of areas, while also extremely thoughtful and deeply moving in a lot of others, which is why I'm giving the new Halloween an 8 out of 10. Now, before we go, let's partake in another round of Short Corner Reviews! Spooky Season Edition! Today we're gonna look at 6 films I never got a chance to review yet that kinda coincide with the Halloween season. Starting with The Nun, the latest prequel spin-off in the ongoing Conjuring universe that featured one too many lame jump scares and piss-poor art direction to be anywhere near as good as the first 2 films and the only decent Annabelle movie in existence. But hey, with only 3 out of 5 good flicks under its belt, it's still doing a lot better than a lot of horror franchises out there that refuse to call it quits. So credit where credit is due, I guess. Shane Black's The Predator is another film I file as a disappointment overall, but not one I flat out hated like everyone else did. I could definitely see how a more comedic take on the Predator franchise was a major turnoff for most die-hard fans, but I could also see how it could have worked had it featured stronger writing, a plot that actually made sense, and an ending that didn't insult the audience's intelligence. While I did have a good time laughing my ass off during most of the film's ridiculous display of violent overkills, it was not enough for me to give it a higher rating than a 5 out of 10. Next we have A Simple Favor, a very fun comedic thriller from the guy who participated in that massive food orgy in Heavyweights and later on directed a handful of hit-and-miss female-led comedies. As far as I can tell, this is the first movie he's done where he got to show off a bit more range as a filmmaker, delving heavily into some pretty dark territory. I would talk more about it, but it's one of those mystery films that's better seen knowing very little about it. All I can say is that it constantly keeps you on your toes, making you question everyone's motives, and ultimately making you wonder just what kind of movie you're actually watching. It's also very stylish, well written and performed, and one of my personal favorites I've seen this year. Now, if you're looking for some Halloween entertainment that the kids might enjoy, then maybe The House with the Clock in its Walls would be the one to do it. And I say maybe because while it is in large part a movie geared towards younger audiences, it still doesn't shy away from being creepy as hell in a lot of areas that might be too intense for some viewers to handle. Hell, I probably would have shit myself if I saw this movie as a kid, but I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, seeing how this is from the makers of Hostel and every single traumatizing thing that ever came out of the 80s. But if you're like me and absolutely love those creepy as hell kids movies from back in the day, then by all means check it out and add it to the pile of new age Halloween classics. Venom, on the other hand, is something that's just way too bland and generic to be even considered a classic in the making, no matter how many fans it somehow attracted. Don't get me wrong, I didn't think this was a terrible movie by any means, it just didn't do anything new or inventive to elevate the superhero genre even further than it already has. Anyways, forgettable movie at best, and a very dated superhero film at worst. And the last movie we're going to look at is Bad Times at the El Royale, from the writer and director of Cabin in the Woods. While it does feature an amazing cast ensemble, catchy soundtrack, and gorgeous production value, there were a lot of points where I felt my ass starting to get numb due to its 140-minute long running time. If it had just trimmed a couple of minutes and featured perhaps a bigger payoff at the very end, I think we could have had a better movie on our hands. But as is, I still got a kick out of this rundown establishment and its dancing shirtless gods of thunder. And now, I leave it up to you guys. What'd you think of the movies I reviewed today? And what are your favorite films to watch every Halloween season? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to keep up with more movie reviews in the near future. Anyways, our show is now concluded. I'm the host, and I got a Halloween party to crash. Roll credits!